Thank you to everybody who came out to our district meetings. We still have a few that are going to be coming up in the districts that haven't met yet. But to those who have been at our district meetings and received a follow-up email from Heather, click on the survey link and leave your comments for the board. The board will be reviewing all comments and all feedback from producers, whether it came from the meetings or from the survey, at their end of June board meeting. And the results of all of the input and surveys will go into the strategic plan to update for our summer meetings. I will be bringing out the results of the updated strategic plan to your summer meetings, your summer district AGMs. So I look forward to seeing you all there with all of the updated strategic work OSF plans to do.
Now let's get into today's episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flock Talk. I'm Erin Morgan.
And I'm Walker Ball, and we work for the members of the Ontario Sheep Farmers.
Today, we're joined by Heather Aitken, a veterinarian based in Ontario who works closely with sheep producers on flock health, lambing management, and overall productivity. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where your work is focused?
Absolutely, yeah. My name is Heather Aitken. I'm a veterinarian in Eastern Ontario, so south of Ottawa. The clinic name is Rideau St. Lawrence, but I also work part-time with Health Canada at the Veterinary Drugs Directorate. So I have two jobs, I guess. I grew up just south of Ottawa in Nepean, so I am a town person. But I did have grandparents that farmed on both sides. So on one side, it was cash crop and beef cattle. On the other side, it was sort of like a homesteading, just a little bit of everything kind of farm. But so I did have a little bit of a farming background in that sense. And yes, I did go to Guelph, and we found out I went to Guelph with Erin, which is pretty cool. I started in 96, graduated in 2000 from the Ontario Agriculture College. I just when I went to Guelph, I didn't realize there was an Ontario Agriculture College. That's how far removed from the agriculture sector I was growing up. But I had two Aggies as roommates. They were fantastic people. I loved the courses they were taking. So I switched over after first semester, had a focus on ruminant nutrition. And at the time it was mostly dairy cattle. But really enjoyed that. And so I had my mind made up. I was going to be a nutritionist. That was going to be where I went after school. And then for whatever reason, I'm like, I kind of like the vet side of things too. So I threw my application in and sure enough, signed up for 4 more years of university.
Well, it's good because you're a goalie and we needed goalies.
That's right.
So it was important to stay on.
I learned that I really enjoyed hockey while I was at Guelph too. So yeah, I had a lot of pucks shot at my head. It was great fun. And it's helped a lot too. So then I went through OVC and graduated in 2004. And I had some really cool opportunities. I think it was there that I really started to get involved on the small ruminant side. So I joined the small ruminant club at vet school. I got a really cool opportunity to go out to Idaho to the sheep research station there during lambing. So it's like, I think at the time they had 6,000 ewes and they were all lambing within the space of about a month. So there were probably 20 to 50 animals lambing any given day. It was crazy. It was a great experience. I got to see a lot of stuff there, lambing issues, a lot of metabolic issues. We had to do some C-sections on ewes, fix a lot of prolapse, all sorts of fun stuff that you just wouldn't get on a smaller farm or, with the smaller farms that we see. So that was really exciting. And then while I was at vet school, I also got the opportunity to work on a sheep dairy, which was a really neat opportunity there, just learning a little bit more. I got to use a little bit more of my nutrition side, but then also learning about the dairy industry when it came to small ruminants, which was and still is much less regulated than the cow dairy side. So I found that really interesting too. I'm going on, but
No, that's okay.
This is how I got here.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So then when I graduated, I came back to Kemptville, south of Ottawa. I came back to the Ottawa area, started at the clinic that I sort of work at now. That clinic's gone through a few changes, ownership and what have you, but still at the same place, basically. At that time, it was 2004. So, Erin, I'm sure you remember too, that was when the year after BSE officially hit Canada. So there was work for large animal veterinarians in my region. Very little. So I went into mixed practice. I think I was 75% small at the time and then large when I could get it. But that was excellent too. I find any opportunity like that is a learning opportunity, and it was really an interesting start to the career. But I definitely learned over time that large food producing, large animal farm work was more what I preferred to do. And then again, sometimes life just throws stuff at you. So 2011, there was a lot of big changes happening in my life, and I got an opportunity. I was asked to come and work for the veterinary drugs director at Health Canada. Because of that small ruminant background, because of that background in sheep and goats, they were trying really hard to encourage drug companies to get some products licensed for those species in particular. So I started there in 2011. I still do both. The regulatory side of things is like all paperwork, all in front of the computer all the time. And I had a very hard time adjusting to that at the beginning because I went from being my own boss basically on the road, being told how to say things and what positions to take. And so it was a big adjustment for sure. But I found the two of them went really well hand in hand. I had a hard time with the paperwork only, so I ended up asking the clinic if I could come back for on-call work. And they're like, yeah, you want to do on-call? Have your fill. You can tell us how much you want to do. So now I do both. I work at the clinic. I was just on call this past weekend, but I still have my office job as well. And then I have developed some sheep and goat clients that I work with specifically, where we focus a lot on flock management, so more preventive medicine. So I do a lot of preg checks, like ultrasounding. We do a lot of fetus counting to try and get groups sorted appropriately. And then I've also I do loin scanning, so looking at lamb chops and using those decisions for management and for reproductive decisions later on. And yeah, it's a big focus on preventive medicine. I found when I was in practice, it was more that fire truck kind of thing. And as you guys know, a sick sheep is often a dead sheep, unfortunately.
Sheep.
Yeah. And so we're really trying to focus on how to catch those things early, how to prevent them before they happen. And it's a much better payoff at the end because you're not having those expensive vet bills with nothing to show for it at the end. So I'm in a super cool spot right now. I love the work on both sides of it. I find they really complement one another, and I love learning stuff. So I'm always learning from somewhere. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you've got the best of both worlds, it sounds.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you really wanted to, you could, change your business cards to like loin scanner.
Right? Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. So today we're talking about lamb mortalities. And so when a producer experiences a lamb loss, where do you typically start in trying to understand what happened?
Yeah. So if I'm getting called because of a lamb loss or lamb losses, the first thing we need to know is when is this happening? Is this like right around lambing time? Or are we dealing with, like a week-old lamb? Like that, I sort of separate it. Is it right at lambing? Is this like an abortion, or is it a mismanagement at that stage? Are we 1 to 3 days old? There are a lot of things that can happen that's different then. Are we that week to weaning area? There are different diseases then. And then are we at the weaned and growing stage? So it really depends on what stage of life we're at with these animals. That's my step one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are there common causes of lamb mortality that you see across farms? And are there warning signs producers might be missing leading up to the losses?
Yeah, so similar to that previous question, it will depend on what stage we're dealing with. So if we're looking at like those right at lambing losses, we have to determine, is this an abortion? Is it a stillbirth? You know, is this something that's like a contagious disease, or is this like a mismanagement type thing? So in that early stage, it can be difficult to have warning signs per se, but that's where, you know, often I'll go back into record keeping. So we'll look at, you know, what breeding dates, you know, as long as they're good, you know, if they've got really good breeding dates or really sort of a condensed breeding time, that will give us an idea of when those lambs should be born. So are these early? If they're early, then we think more about the abortion side of things. It's not really a warning sign, but it's, you know, how we're starting to determine what's going on. Do we know if there's multiples or singles, like we do the preg checking? In older animals, one of the big things I really promote is observation. I mean, who doesn't love lambs running around in a pen? It's like the coolest thing in the world, right? They get going in these big circles and they're jumping and it's so much fun. But what I tell producers is watch the last ones. They're the ones that if you want to look for warning signs, those are the ones you got to take care of and have a look at. I've got a great video that I love to show on some of the discussions we have where it's like there are about 100 lambs running and then there's one that's kind of plodding behind and he's trying to keep up. And then the group turns around and just bowls him right over because he's just sort of stuck there like, oh. So that's the lamb that we pull out. We're like, okay, what is going on with you? And that's when we look at things like, do they have dirty bums? Is this a diarrhea issue? Are they breathing faster than their buddies? Those are the things that we're looking for. So it's really observation.
Oh, that could be a children's book. There's a story we can distill from this.
Yeah, there probably is.
So when you're looking back on cases, how often do you see opportunities where a loss could have been prevented, and what are some of the less obvious factors that tend to contribute?
Mm-hmm. I feel like in 95% of cases, there's a reason why something happened. I mean, it's the old adage, right? Like if you have livestock, you are going to have dead stock, and that's just unfortunately something that does happen. And there are always the wild and wonderful things. Like I can remember going to see a lamb, and we ended up putting an ultrasound on, and the heart, you could tell right away with the ultrasound that the heart was just not functioning correctly. So that's something that you're not going to really be able to fix or know that it's coming necessarily. Mm-hmm. So if we're thinking more infectious, is this something that we're going to be treating, or is it something we're going to try and prevent with vaccination? Some of the odd places that I see weird things happening or things that are super preventable happening, because we're in a growth industry with sheep and goats, I see a lot of newer producers that are coming in. They may not be new to livestock, but they're new to sheep. And so they don't necessarily have the understanding that you would. Like sheep behavior is very different than any other, and even goat behavior is different than sheep behavior. So I think sometimes that lack of understanding can be part of the issue. So for instance, we had a beef guy that switched over into sheep, and he went out one evening for his last barn check. He went to check a ewe. There were 2 feet. So he's like, yeah, fine, went to bed. And I'm like, oh, in sheep, 2 feet is not necessarily 2 feet. It might be 2 separate feet, 2 separate heads. Like you can't leave those. So we were fortunate. The next morning we pulled out 3 live lambs. They had a rough go because, you know, they should have been born the night before. But, you know, just that lack of understanding sometimes. It's just sometimes an educational bit. Another problem I see quite often, especially with newer producers, is where they're not looking at the ewes per se. Like they don't understand how hard it is on that ewe to build a lamb, especially at the last month or so, the last 6 weeks, the last month of pregnancy. So that ewe is putting everything into those lambs. They will take stuff out of their own body to put into the lambs if they're not getting enough food into them. And so we'll often go and they'll have like little weak lambs that are born that have a really hard time. And you put your hands like through the wool on the ewes, and it's like, this ewe has like a zero body condition. This is the problem. So it's those things. It's more education, and it's more trying to find out the root cause. And then I think any death is an opportunity to learn something. Even in the well-schooled producers too. I can remember a larger farm that I deal with. They were having abortions, so we have a protocol that I could talk about later on. And so we sent a couple to the lab, and it didn't, like, we were all expecting something infectious. And we're like, okay, well, we had in our mind what we're going to do. It turns out it wasn't. It was like a contaminant just from the environment. Well, that's really strange, until I went and we looked at the barn, and they were packed. Like, all the animals were so packed in there. It had been very wet, very humid. And I think it was just a case of too many animals. So we separated them out into different pens, and the abortion stopped. So it's just stuff like that, right? So I think they're all learning opportunities. They're all very different opportunities. And I find I learn something every time I'm out working with sheep and goats.
Yeah, so
fascinating.
So talk to us a little bit about how you distinguish between losses are driven by disease and those that come down to management or environment. Like, what tips you off?
Yeah, for me, like personally, if it's me going to a farm, I love to do postmortems on farm. Sorry, that sounds bad.
I just love it.
I don't like dead animals. I'll just put that out there right now. But if they come up, I do enjoy going through a postmortem, because you can often see a lot of stuff. And that, Erin, is often where you can distinguish between, is this something that's infectious or is it not? When we get into like an outbreak type situation, if we're having a bunch, and a bunch can depend on the size of the farm. In some cases, a very small farm, one becomes a bunch, but on a large farm, maybe we're looking at 3 or 4 before we start getting worried. In those cases, I often recommend sending them to the lab, especially if we've done a PM and you don't see anything. Then we're thinking this has got to be something more infectious that we have to worry about. I think those are the main issues that we worry about, like distinguishing between the two when we're talking about deaths. If you're able to do postmortems on farm, it's something that you can learn a lot from. And often those really obvious things they tend to be more management issues. And so there's something that you can fix yourself versus when we get into infectious causes.
When you're looking at a postmortem, where do you look first?
So when you're doing postmortems, if you start getting it, because this is definitely something every producer can, in my opinion, should do. I get that it's weird and it's not comfortable for everybody, and that's fine. But if you're able to do on-farm postmortems, the main thing I would say, Erin, is just consistency. So you're going to go through a system all the time. And the reason you stay with the consistent system is so you don't miss stuff. So first thing you do in any situation, you look at the whole situation. Let's say we've got a lamb in front of us. Does it look thin? Does it look fat? Does it have a really big belly? Are there signs of diarrhea? Does it have a snotty nose? Just the obvious things. And then what you can do is you'll start by pulling skin back. You can see, were they dehydrated? Do they have that subcutaneous fat? Are we looking at maybe malnutrition? Or is there a bunch of bruising under there? Maybe this thing has been, gotten into a fight or gotten stuck somewhere, been stepped on, been sat on, who knows, been trampled. And then I'll go into the abdomen, into the soft belly part, and I'll look in there. And so you're looking for things like, is there blood? Is there a sign of infection? Is there a sign of diarrhea that just hasn't come out the back end yet? Other things you want to look for, is there milk in the stomach? Has it eaten? So these are all sort of adding to the story of what's happened in these animals. And then last, I tend to go to the chest area. And then there are techniques to find out if the chest is still a vacuum, because, you need a vacuum in there to help your lungs expand and flows. And so we'll check that. We'll check, I would say 90% of the time, if I'm checking older lambs, I'm looking at pneumonia as the main cause. So really? You'll be able to see that right away when you open that chest. So it just depends on the level of pneumonias that we're dealing with.
Wow.
Younger lambs, we tend to see other stuff. See more diarrheas, more septicemias. Like if, navel dipping is such an important part of that first management, the first processes we do with young lambs, we want that navel dried up as fast as possible because we don't want infections going in. So for people that aren't aware, the navel is where the lamb is getting its nutrition from the mom when it's still inside. When the lamb is born, obviously everything is wet because there's so much fluid involved. Yeah. That navel rips. That ripping of the navel tells the body that's like, I have to be my own being now. And so it starts a bunch of mechanisms. But the problem is those little lambs are susceptible to everything in the environment. So that's why we want to make sure we have clean environments. We want to have like nice clean areas for those lambs. And that navel with the wet, it's just picking up bacteria from everywhere. So that's why making sure that that navel is dipped completely, depending on we use chlorhexidine, we use iodine and alcohol often. We want to make sure that navel dries up fast so it stops that highway so that bacteria have less of a chance of getting in. If they get into that navel, then they go straight to the liver and then they go straight through the rest of the body. So that's why it's so important to make sure we can dry up that navel and stop that route of transmission early on. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So data obviously is really helpful because it allows producers to identify patterns. So would you say that there's a point where mortality levels become a concern where you would recommend having a threshold or a trigger that prompts a specific response or protocol?
Yeah, I think I love data. Oh, I love almost as much as postmortem.
I really enjoy you, Heather.
Sorry. I think data record keeping is so important, especially on sheep farms, especially when you get into higher producing animals, when you're getting multiples. And there's a bigger demand for management. You need to be more on your nutrition. You need to know what's going to happen with these animals. Like we've got some super productive breeds of sheep out there. Like when you're having like triplets and quads and that's like standard, there are a couple farms I don't bother counting because it's always more than two, always. There's other farms that we still count because we've got different breeds, different management styles, that sort of thing. But if you don't keep track of individuals, you are losing so many opportunities to improve your flock. So number one, if you don't know where you are, I don't know whose quote this is, but if you don't know where you are, how do you know where you're going? If you don't have that data to begin with, you're never going to know if you're making changes, if they're the right changes. And I just don't feel that you'll ever be able to improve appropriately. I think you'll just sort of stay status quo. When we have data available, we can really see where we're having issues. It's not just that, I think it was here. It's like, no, I've got the numbers to say it was here. And then once we know where we're having issues, you can target you can focus your attention on the problems and try and make them better. I know you said if you're asking about cutoffs, there are cutoffs. It's OMAFA now, I think, or is it
OMAFA.
It's changed so many times in my lifetime now. So anyway, the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture et al. They have some fantastic resources as far as numbers. I don't necessarily memorize those numbers because I find I deal with such a wide variety of producers. It's hard to say these are benchmarks because we have Suffolk guys that, one or two is a good, you just want to make sure you got one or two nice lambs. That's fantastic. We've got Rito people that are having close to 3 lambs per ewe being weaned. I mean, you get the gamut, right? And so it's hard to say, well, that everybody fits into this. We've got purebred breeders that, aren't necessarily trying to produce the best lamb. They're trying to produce the best animal for purebred owners. So what I prefer to do is have those conversations with the farmers that I work with. We look at what their goals are. And we do internal goal setting. And I find that so much more productive than trying to hit a benchmark that is an average across this incredibly diverse industry. So sorry, it's not really answering the question, but that record keeping, I think, is the key aspect of that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, Heather. Makes a lot of sense. And I could imagine that just like it would apply just like to any other industry or any other individual. Sometimes when we are presented with the opportunity to make a shift and to identify what's actually going on, that actually can be scary, because then you're going to find out what it is and then you have to make the changes.
Yeah. Well, and what I find interesting too about this industry, so I have been in it for, I don't like to count the years, but for a year or two. And I can remember when I first started, oh my gosh, I would get not yelled at, but I mean, and I'm not meaning to offend any of our sheep producers out there, but they're those guys that are like, I've been having sheep since my grandfather had sheep and my great-grandfather had sheep, and you don't know what you're talking about. And every time I call you, then the animal dies. And I'm like, okay, this is not helping. So I find what's really nice right now is we are getting these newer producers in. Some of them don't have that generational background of, like this is the way it's been done and this is the way it's going to be done. And so they're starting to push these ideas, and I find there's a lot more people that are very receptive to the idea of having veterinarians in on a proactive basis, and they understand the benefit of that. We have some excellent generational farmers that are so proactive, and they're some of our best producers, and I love working with them dearly. So I'm not targeting anybody in particular. I just know there are
just that mindset of not willing to learn something new.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, I don't think those farms are going very far. I think that might be because it's less fun when, personally, I find like if you can't improve, then there's less excitement in it somehow. Yeah.
So talk to us about, you go onto a farm with a proactive mindset, and you're one of the producers' goals is reducing their lamb losses. What does that sort of proactive approach look like?
Yeah, and it comes back again to that record keeping. So we've got to decide, where are we losing them? Are we losing them early? Are we losing them mid? Are we losing them later? So if it's like an early loss type of a thing, we're talking the first couple days of life, I'd definitely be looking at colostrum management, like right around lambing. Are we making sure that those lambs are getting enough colostrum? So I'm not sure how aware the producers that listen are, but colostrum is that first sort of yellowy, creamy milk that's really important for providing immunity to those young lambs. So when a lamb is born, they're born with no antibodies to anything. There's none of that cross-placenta security that other species get. Cattle are the same. There are a lot of animals that are like that. So they're very reliant on that very first milk that comes out. And so ensuring that each lamb gets enough of that and making sure that they're well protected against diseases that will affect them like right away. You know what lambs are like. They're wet, they fall down, or they're born into the environment. The environment's wet. As they're getting up, they're running into everything, so they're just little bacteria vacuums, which is a good thing, because they do have good bacteria in there as well. But at the same time, there's a lot of bad bacteria out there. So we want to make sure that we're trying to prevent them. We want to give them the best chance they can have.
Yeah.
So that's why, so those early death losses, I'd be looking at colostrum management. I'd be looking at ewe nutrition, again, putting my hands on the ewe to make sure that she is well conditioned, that she's in a good body condition. And I would also be looking at the management of the environment, do we have 100 ewes all lambing in one pen and it's gross? Or, are we identifying those ewes that are lambing or have just lambed, throwing them into clean jugs, like clean lambing pens, getting them, treated with selenium and vitamin E right away as well. So that would be that early management, the very early ones. If we're looking at lambing groups if we have problems on a farm that sort of affecting them, we've got them through that first week, They seem to be doing well, but then when they're on creep or something like that, they're starting to get issues at that stage. A lot of times I'm dealing with pneumonias or coccidia issues. And so we have to identify, what are we dealing with? Pneumonia, or are we dealing with coccidia? If it's coccidia, there are lots of products that we can use. And so, and there are preventive products now too out there. So something like Baycox is a tool that we use regularly. And it would depend on when you're seeing the issue, but you can often give that preemptively, like in your trouble time. It's expensive stuff, but the benefit of Baycox is if you're giving it at the appropriate time, the lambs never slow down. So that's also where record keeping can come into play. Are the growth rates of these lambs slowing down? Are we starting to see, you might not have a full blown diarrhea or something like that. You might just have some infection that just slows them down a bit. So if we know what those causes are, then we can see when we should be giving a treatment of that nature. And then if you're keeping track afterwards, you can see the benefits of that treatment, especially if you've got year-to-year data. And then for things like pneumonia, often that's later on as well. Again, I've relied heavily. It's one thing to say pneumonia. It's another thing to know what's causing the pneumonia. And that can be very difficult to determine, especially if you're throwing a bunch of antibiotics at something. And sometimes when we're dealing with pneumonias, it's almost better to have this, like a swine or chicken mentality, was like, if we've got an outbreak, maybe we should sacrifice one or two that we know we're not going to make better before we treat them with anything. So that way the antibiotics we use don't influence the bugs that are already in there. Oh. So we can send them to the lab, and then the lab can do testing, and then we can target our treatment after that. Huh. So yeah. Cool. So that, it's a long-winded answer. Oh, and then obviously later on in our area, at least, we still have quid producers on pasture. And so pasture parasites is it's sort of big groups of things that we're dealing with. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I just quickly ask, what would be a different cause for pneumonia that a producer might not be aware of?
So pneumonia is it's an infection in the chest. So to the point where the lungs aren't working appropriately. The reason behind it, there can be a lot. So there are a lot of different diseases that will cause pneumonia. So there are a lot of bacteria, there are a lot of viruses, there are mycoplasmas as well that contribute to pneumonia. Typically, it's very similar to like a beef pneumonia. You've got high stress situation, and what that does is it knocks down the immune system of the animals. Often you've got crowding, so we don't have so much the shipping aspect of it, but often in lambing pens, we got a lot of animals in there, especially as they're getting bigger. It's just a lot of space, and sometimes air quality can be an issue. And what we're looking for in the air quality aspect of it is that we want to make sure that ammonia levels, careful not to say pneumonia, ammonia levels in the pen are not high. When you're a human and you're walking through a sheep pen, that's great. And your air might be perfect. And you're like, there's no ammonia in here at all. Mm. What you have to do in these cases when we're looking at pneumonia outbreaks is we actually have to get down on all fours at the same level of the sheep and then determine if there's ammonia. So if you're getting down there and you can smell that smell, yeah, and it hurts your lungs. I know I've been in some barns where you're in that and you're working in it and you go home and you're coughing and coughing. So ammonia actually breaks down the barrier in the lungs, which allows then bacteria to get in.
Got it.
Yeah. And then the lambs themselves, if they're snotty, if they're sneezing on everything, they're just spreading bugs everywhere. Sure. And it's usually a mixture of bugs. But there are a couple of really baddies that we can treat or vaccinate for. And so it's always this three-pronged issue, right? Like there's the animal's health, there's the environment, the component of it, and then there's the bugs themselves. And so it's trying to find out where the biggest pressure is coming on the animals or on the groups that we're dealing with, and then go from there. Yeah.
So this is like the Hugh Jackman movie, Sheep Detective, but potentially the sequel.
I haven't seen that yet, so please no spoilers.
I haven't seen it yet either.
I haven't seen it either.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, before we close, Heather, what is one thing that you want to make sure our producers take away from this conversation?
Gosh, observation. I think observation, like knowing your animals, knowing sheep behavior, not just looking at them, but like at lambing time, around lambing time, getting your hands right in them. I mean, I think that's so important. And I think there are some really good resources there to help you learn about sheep behavior, help you use sheep behavior. Like I had sheep for a while. I did forget that in my little bio part. I had sheep for a while and I had never been so frustrated in my life. Because before, like I would break tools against the wall. I'd be so mad. It's because I didn't understand how to work with them appropriately, right? So I think that can be a lifesaver. That Master Shepherd's course is an excellent one. Oh my God. There's so I've taken a couple of them. So a couple of the sections and I found them really, really interesting. And then record keeping. Record keeping is amazing, just to know, as I said, know where you are from year to year, or for those producers that have multiple lambing groups per year, you can separate them out by stage, like by group, like these spring lambing groups, your summers, your winters, they're all going to have little intricacies to them. So yeah, observation, knowing your flock, knowing sheep behavior, and record keeping, those things will get you a long way.
Amazing. Thanks, Heather.
Oh, thank you.
Been very informative. Yeah, super informative.
And I just wanted to add for anyone who wasn't aware that the Master Shepherd's course is on the OntarioSheep.org website, in case people aren't aware. So thank you for adding that. That's not even, we didn't even pay her to do that.
Yeah.
She's not paid at all for this, but we didn't even have to push her on that.
Yeah, and you can take individual modules if you don't want to commit to the entire course. So yeah, that's a very valuable resource.
So great, so interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll have to call you Morticia now, because
That's right. I have to dye my hair.
Yeah,
Wear all black.
we'll have some fun with the reels that we from the audio clip reels that we extract here.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Heather. And
thank you.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Flock Talk, please subscribe through your podcast app to receive alerts to our future episodes. And please share our podcast with your friends.
For more Ontario Sheep Farmers content, follow us on social media under the handle @Ontario Sheep Farmers on Instagram and Facebook, and visit our website at ontariosheep.org for more resources.